Hello and welcome to episode 9, where today we are discussing what to think about when moving to Spain with children. So we're going to touch on the Spanish education system, international schools as well as public and private schools, universities, the curriculum. It's a busy one. And as ever, I'm not here alone. I would like to welcome to the podcast the headmaster of Sunnyview School in Torremolinos, Andrew Beavon, and sales director here at Kyero and mum to 2 teenage boys, Sian Burton. Guys, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for chatting to me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
It's going to be great because, I'm just going to be really honest. I don't have kids, so I'm far away from this topic and I feel like I have got a lot to learn. So if we begin with just a little bit more of an introduction. Andrew, do you want to go first? Just tell me a bit more about Sunnyview, your role as a head teacher, what that entails.
Okay, so Sunnyview School's been going for almost 50 years. We're just coming up to our 50th birthday. We're one of the longest established British schools here in Spain. We take students from age 2 to 18, and we teach fully the British curriculum. Well, actually, what we mean by that is we teach the English national curriculum, because actually in the UK, there's a different curriculum in Scotland and Ireland and so on and so forth. So we follow the English national curriculum here. And all of our teaching is just as it would be if you went to a school in England. If you picked us up and dropped us in England, the only main difference would be that in our curriculum, we teach a higher content around Spanish language and also around Spanish culture as well. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, it's pretty much like a school you'd find in the UK.
Interesting. Okay, I have many questions on that, but Sian, do you want to go next? Just let me know a little bit more about your story. When did you move with your boys? How old were they? What happened?
I moved here with my husband 15 years ago. We didn't have children. We were actually told we couldn't have children in the UK. We moved to Spain, and within 6 months I was pregnant. Big surprise. Didn't know that would happen after being told it wouldn't. And that brought up loads of questions, like how, what, where, so many things. Even down to how you give birth in Spain, and midwives, and there was just so many questions. And although I spoke quite good Spanish when I came already, whenever you find yourself in a new position and you find yourself in a whole new room of vocab that you've got no idea how, like an ITV for your car or having a child. So anyway, soon after that, I was pregnant again after giving birth. So something definitely changed when we moved to Spain. We're kind of we're the complete opposite to what we were in the UK. But I tried everything with my children. I put them with a private nanny. I've tried public nursery. I've done private nursery. I've done public school, and they're now at private school.
Wow, so, great. You are the right person to have here.
They were both born here, and so I can't really give you the view of how a child moves here, but I do have lots of friends who have moved here with children at different ages, so I can give some advice to what I've seen work and what doesn't really work.
Yeah, absolutely. No, sorry, that was my mistake. So they were actually born, but it was still very different from what you had planned. That's what I love about your story, and that it was a real sort of change in headspace. I suppose, broadly speaking, my question to you is, does Spain feel child friendly?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I say all the time, I can't imagine bringing up children anywhere else. Now, I know there must be other places, Portugal, Greece, where it feels like this, but the freedom of the beach and the living outdoors, and, the kids get 12 weeks off in summer here, and they just go to a summer camp and it's based at the beach and they're doing water sports all day, and we never have to worry about the rain. And I really can't imagine bringing them up anywhere else. And I know other countries have good weather as well, but then there's the safety aspect. You just feel like there's a real community spirit. And I've toured all over Spain many times, and wherever you go, it just feels like everyone's looking out for you as a family, you as your children. I just love it.
That's so nice. Andrew, would you agree? How is that? Because obviously you have this lovely experience where you see the whole spectrum of ages, right from when you're just starting school. Mm-hmm. How do you feel like the kids are when they begin, right at the beginning of their school journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would echo what Sian has just said in terms of what Spain offers for families bringing up children. I think that it reminds me a little bit of my own childhood when I had that kind of freedom to go out and run and do things, and parents didn't seem so preoccupied about you being out until 10 o'clock at night because there was a lot more, I don't know, it just felt much more, it feels much more safe and secure here. And I think, as Sian says as well, that sense of community here is really tangible. It's, people do look out for each other. People do kind of keep an eye on one another. I think that as young children start with us, I mean, obviously, as a British school, you kind of expect that most of our students will be British, but actually that's not true at all. Most of our students are Spanish. So when they're starting their educational journey with us, their Spanish is just developing if they start with us at the age of 2 or 3. They're having, it's an emergent Spanish language. For many of them, they start with 0 English, but very, very quickly they build up that kind of confidence in both languages because they're immersed in their home language, but they've also got the benefit of having skilled professionals working with them here in school to develop their English skills. And we work very much on kind of doing that through a kind of a supportive and a nurturing environment, lots of play-based activities and things like that. So, and our early years very much mirrors the kind of expectations that you'd find in an earlier setting in the UK as well. So,
and is it true that children's brains are much more adept to take on multiple languages, and you find them actually to be much less self-conscious, perhaps, but just like little sponges? So both of those languages, the duality of English and Spanish, really do flourish quicker the younger they are.
I think that, there's lots of research that shows that this is the case, and actually children don't just have the ability to kind of pick up one language, but multiple languages at an early age. I think some parents feel a little bit kind of nervous about this, and so sometimes you'll find that they will try and, not speak their home language. They'll try and speak in English as well. And we're like, no, keep up with the home language, keep up with that. Because actually, by developing both languages, you're actually developing the child more fully and actually creating a kind of a base on which they can go further with not just language learning, but also learning in general. So
yeah, totally. And Sian, are your boys bilingual? How's that worked for you?
Yeah, it's they're bilingual. I would say they have some aspects of language that's better in English and some aspects that are better in Spanish. One thing that I do notice, the older that they get, we really have to push more and more Spanish vocabulary on them because their friends, their Spanish friends, they're around Spanish people all the time. They go to their grannies, they go into the bank and they're overhearing conversations about getting a mortgage and that kind of thing. Whereas my children aren't really getting that exposure in Spanish as much as. They get some, but not to the same level. So I do think there's a certain amount of vocab that they probably acquire later than I'd like them to. But I think as parents, as long as you're aware of that, you can do things. You can do kid swaps. We've done that sometimes. So, mine get immersed more into a Spanish life and theirs get more immersed in an English life. But exactly what Andrew said, when I was doing a TEFL course in Granada, the first thing that they told me that was really important about teaching language to children or to anyone was always speak in your own language. So they said to me, never speak in Spanish to your children because you're English, and a child's brain will pigeonhole that person with that language. They won't think mummy speaks English, just mummy speaks this. And Andrew speaks that, daddy speaks that, the teacher speaks this. And it doesn't matter what those languages are, they pigeonhole very, very differently.
Interesting.
So I found that really interesting, yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. But it just sounds like they've had this fantastic opportunity, and I think bilingual children are amazing, and I just think it's such an amazing thing to be able to give your children as well, which is this huge benefit to moving. What
might go wrong with the pigeonholing, if my Spanish isn't perfect, which it isn't, I'm suddenly teaching them incorrectly.
Yeah.
And they'll carry on with that learning. But no, the bilingual side of things is fantastic. And I definitely see that there's more connection going on with language, full stop, and they can see why a Spanish word might be what it is because they know an English word, things like that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And just knowledge of language. I wanted to move from language and just talk a little bit more about money and finances. And maybe if we go back to the beginning of a child's educational system and start with childcare costs. And Sian, you're probably going to be the best place to answer this. But how did you find those compare? It comes up a lot in the UK that childcare is extortionate. Is it the same in Spain? Absolutely not, no.
And my friends used to have absolute fury when I used to moan about the cost that I was spending on childcare. So when I had my first little one, I recruited a private nanny one-to-one, and I wanted a Spanish lady. I wanted them to be fully immersed in the Spanish family, go to grannies, go for lunch, have siestas. I wanted all of that. And I paid €5 an hour, and she was amazing. Absolutely amazing. She became part of the family.
Wow.
And then when I had a second child, that went up to €9 an hour for the two of them. And she used to have them for 5 hours a day. I just did a little bit of working out here. So when it was one child a month, it was about €500, which is sort of 400 and something pounds. And when it was the two of them, it was 900 for the month. But, this was one-to-one and then two-on-one.
Yeah.
And it really brought them on in every way, the culture, the language, everything. And that is not expensive. Then it came to an age where I realised that they probably needed to be around more children, not just the one-to-one thing. So I put them into a state nursery, and the prices of a state nursery vary greatly depending on what your income is. And I think it was something like it can start at €50 a month up to £395.
Oh, interesting. So do you mean it's means tested?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
So because my husband and I both worked full time and there was nothing we could claim, they actually apologised to us to say, I'm very, very sorry, but you're going to have to pay full price. And back then it was 300 and something euros. And I felt terrible that I was making a saving, and they were there for longer and they were getting their lunch.
Wow.
And they're just magical, these ladies. The nursery that they went to, it was above a nunnery. And it was just, the ladies were fantastic. Really, really, everything you expect from Spanish ladies, very loving, warm, treating them as their children, really. Shall I go on to school as well?
I was just going to say, Sian, I was just checking today that because this isn't an area of expertise of mine, but I just thought out of interest, I was looking at what prices are still for state-run nurseries. So for up to 0 to 3s, and it's still around 300 and something euros for the full price. So
it hasn't changed.
They froze the prices for 10 years. It's only just in the last year or so that they've actually slightly increased them. So it's compared to kind of what you would pay in the UK. It's a pittance, really. So
it's dramatically different, isn't it? And do you notice, Andrew, when people, so more thinking about the English clientele rather than the Spanish students that you've mentioned, but when English families have made the move and their kids are starting, is there a level of surprise then at the cost? Is there a level of surprise at what's on offer?
Yeah, I guess the thing is when you compare it then to coming to somewhere like us as a private international school, the prices do jump up quite a lot,
right.
But they're still cheaper compared to private schools in the UK. So for an international school from sort of age 3 up, you're probably looking at around €4,000 a year, something like that. And that would be for a nursery or reception, actually maybe a little bit less than that. Some of the Spanish private schools are a little bit cheaper. Right. And they don't tend to, as you move through, they don't tend to increase the prices as much as what happens in a British school. The reason that the prices increase kind of quite dramatically in British schools is because the closer you get to A-levels, where it's more specialised teaching and usually there's less children in the class, that's why you end up having to pay more for A-level tuition. But
right.
and I mean, Sian, you probably have some experience of this as well. I mean, it really also depends on where you're living in this part of the Costa del Sol, sort of around Malaga, Torremolinos. The prices are around half what you might pay if you were at a Marbella school. Marbella schools tend to be an awful lot more expensive. The geography is important too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Sian, do carry on though. You were going to talk about schools. Does that ring true with your experience,
yes,
what Andrew just talked through?
Totally true what Andrew was saying. So we do have an international school near us. I live in Almuñecar, and their international school, if I remember rightly, is about €700-ish a month. Mine go to a school further down the coast, not quite as far out as Andrew's school, sort of in between where I live and there. And that's a private Spanish school, although it is bilingual. So they do some lessons in Spanish. It's called Nova School Añoreta. And that's about 400, 450 per child for my children's age. The younger they are, the cheaper it is. But yeah, when you compare like for like, I know I'm getting a massive bargain for private education.
Yeah. And as a parent, when you're making that choice between private and public, I mean, it's such a personal choice for each family to make. It's a controversial topic in the UK, certainly. Is it a controversial topic in Spain? What kind of factors play into that when you're considering the differences? What are the differences between the two?
I think for me, because it's quite a lot cheaper than the UK, I think it's more accessible for more people. And I definitely noticed that geography comes into this as well. So if there's a family living nearish to a private school, they may put their children in it just because it's the closest and it's not too expensive. I've definitely noticed that. I don't think there's as much stigma here, but there were some questions when I moved mine from the state school. They were in the junior school. There were some mums that were very, they really questioned why I was doing it and what are the costs and all the hours, they're so much longer. But having said that, because I'm from the UK, I'm so used to my children working, being at school longer hours anyway. Here they just do 9 till 10 in state school. And I don't know, I just wanted them doing that little bit more.
So wait, what are spell those out for me. What are the hour differences?
So in Spain, state school is 9 till 2.
Okay.
And that's it. That's home for the day. And in the UK, it used to be, I can't remember if it was 9 or 8:30 till 3:30, 4 o'clock.
Okay, so more traditionally what we would expect in the UK.
Yeah.
A private school would do more like UK hours. What hours do your school do, Andrew?
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. 9 to 4 for primary. Well, we do, so sort of 9 to 3:30 for preschool. So that's up to the reception age. From year 1 to year 6, it's 9 till 4. And for secondary, it's 8:45 till 4. Right. And yeah, I mean, it is quite a difference. I mean, going back to what Sian was saying about stigma, I agree. I don't think that there is the same stigma, but I think also there's certain things here in Spain that you can pay for privately that are much more accessible. Medical care is another thing that's much more accessible here from a price point of view, and so is education. And I think for that reason, it's I was going to say it's more democratic. That's probably not entirely accurate because obviously it still puts the price puts it out of reach of a lot of people, but it is more. I mean, we have a lot of parents who don't have don't drive around in Ferraris and Lamborghinis. They actually work at the airport and they can afford to send their children to our school because it is more achievable. In terms of differences, I mean, I think Spanish education is changing a lot, and there is a real drive to change how Spanish education functions. But traditionally, it's been very textbook led. A lot of Spanish schools work solely from textbooks, and actually one of the reasons why a lot of families choose a British education or an international education is because the school day is structured in a very different way. Children aren't sitting at a desk filling in workbooks, or, they are actually engaged in inquiry and creative activities and problem solving. And I, like I say, I wouldn't generalize now and say that all Spanish schools are like that, but traditionally more Spanish schools are like that. Traditionally, a lot of Spanish settings, children would be sat at a table for a lot of the day, filling in activity books and things like that. They wouldn't be playing in sand and water and things like that we would expect younger children to be doing. Whereas, of course, the thought of us sitting a 3-year-old down at a table for most of the day would be horrific, and most people would see that as almost like child abuse. So it is very different. It is very different. But like I say, there is a real movement, and all credit to kind of the Spanish education authorities. They want to move the curriculum on. But yeah, I think, and I think that's possibly one of the differences between why people choose a state school here versus a private school, or vice versa, because actually in the UK, if you're choosing between a state school and a private school, pretty much what they're going to be doing is similar. The actual setup is very similar, whereas a Spanish state school here, the way they organise a school day might be very different to how a school day is organised in a private or international school.
Yes.
And the hours, we've touched on, curriculum-wise, are they the same though? Are they very similar?
No, not really. The curriculum, like I say, is traditionally in Spanish schools, it's been very textbook based. We follow, like I said, the English national curriculum, and our intention is to develop those skills in our students, which are going to translate into things that they can use in the workplace. That's ultimately what we're working. We're not focusing on a knowledge-based curriculum. We're focusing on a skills-based curriculum. And I think still a lot of Spanish schools, their curriculum is very much based on the acquisition of knowledge as opposed to skills.
Interesting. And Sian, have you seen developmentally through your boys, are they wired differently? That's not really what I mean. Do they see the world differently, I suppose? Have you noticed this kind of difference in a reliance on skills and things like that? Have you noticed anything to do with that?
Yeah, totally. On many different levels. Within a few weeks of them being at the private school, I can remember we were in a cafe or restaurant, and someone had come in with a cap and they were talking quite slang. And my little one said to me, "Oh, Mama, that's really bad manners, isn't it, what they're doing?" And I said, "Yeah, it is. Where have you learned that?" And they said, "Well, they've been telling us at school." So there's actually been this level of education as well that's about manners and how we portray ourselves and how others may portray us. And that was never a thing in state school. I'm not saying that that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it's a very interesting thing to have your eyes open to.
Yeah.
And lots of little things like that. Definitely, there's a cost issue in state schools here. The teachers at their junior school and primary school regularly ask me to bring in unwanted games and things because they couldn't.
So there's a funding issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Funding. So I would take little things in, and they'd have jigsaws that were years old and so many pieces missing. And it's a tiny bit sad, really, that some children are missing out because of that funding. But I guess that's all around the world, isn't it? It's nothing.
Well, I think it's interesting that I took some people from Sunnyview over to the UK a few years ago. We had a particular intention. We were looking for some software for the school, but I kind of used it as an opportunity to show some of the people from our school, including one of the owners, what British schools in the UK were like. And we went to a private school, but we also went to a state primary school and a state secondary school. And actually, state education in the UK, depending on where you live, can be really well funded. And they were quite surprised how well funded state schools were in the UK in terms of resources and one thing and another. And I think, as Sian says, it is a shame that state education, wherever it is, whether it's in Spain or anywhere in the world, isn't seen as a priority by politicians sometimes, because absolutely, regardless of I'm sitting here as the head teacher of a private school, but I mean, as an educator, I want every child to have the very best start in life.
Yeah.
That's what they're entitled to. So, and it shouldn't matter whether their parents can afford to pay for them to go to private school or not.
No, and I have a very similar experience with about 6 weeks in or 6 months into my children going to the private school. We were invited to a parent day, and parents could go to the school. They had to book into each child's lesson, so there wasn't overcrowding in each room. And the first lesson I went to was my youngest English lesson. Well, my youngest English is fine, but I remember seeing the standard of English in the state school. It was really bad, and we'd have the Spanish kids over to play, and it was fun. That's how I describe it. I used to get a little bit annoyed because I would approach the school and say, you're still doing numbers, and my child's 7, 8 years old. You're still doing numbers and colours. And they say, well, the other children haven't caught up. But when we went to this parent day and I joined this English class, I cried twice. The first time I cried, it was out of sheer joy that I was hearing all of these children read pages out of a book. And the teacher had done it so interesting. He wasn't saying read paragraph by paragraph. He was giving them little tasks to look for certain grammatical points where they'd start or stop. And then I realized a Spanish girl had said dog, not do. All of these little tiny things. And then the second time I got all teary was because I realized that this is only happening because all these parents are paying for this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that felt a bit uncomfortable, actually, because that shouldn't be the case.
I think the thing to take away is that there are global issues here, right? And there are global issues that become political and socioeconomic and all of those things. And they are going to stand up regardless of what country you are in. But actually, possibly, if you are coming over from the UK, what you know, in inverted commas, to be the truth about state education or private education maybe needs to be parked a little bit. And actually, it's going to be investigating each school individually and geographically each region, which is going to be quite important for parents. Thinking again on the curriculum lines, when you get to exam level, probably a question for Andrew, this one. Is it the same as what we know? Are there SATs? I mean, probably my knowledge is outdated now. It's been a while since I was at school. But SATs, GCSEs, A-levels. Are they all recognisable things? Are you tested at the same age, and are you tested to the same level?
Okay, more or less. I think that one of the joys of being a British school in Spain is we do not have to report data to the Department for Education.
Right.
We are inspected. All British schools in Spain are inspected. They're inspected on behalf of the British Council. The British Council is the body that provides authorisation to British schools. And in order for a British school here to operate, they do have to be authorised. So when the inspection team go in, and the inspections are once every 4 years, they will look at your data that you have. So there is an expectation that you do have evidence to show that the children are making progress. That doesn't have to be SATs. It can be SATs. Right. But there are so many different systems out there now and assessment systems. For example, we use one system in primary that is, they're basically, we do what we call summative tests. So once a term, we do these tests that are directly linked to the curriculum that the children have been following in English and maths during that term, and we track that data. And then when they go to secondary, then we start doing, again, some kind of general tests, which don't just look at their English and maths, but look more globally at their kind of progress. And we keep track of that as they move through, working up to, in our school, GCSEs and A-levels eventually. Right. Just a little backtrack, and it is related to this, about kind of another difference between Spanish schools and British schools, is that one of the things in a British school that we expect is that students will always be in the year group that they were born to be in. They will move through the school in the year group where they should be. Mm-hmm. In the Spanish system, there is the possibility that if a student is lagging behind and they fail the year, that they could actually be put back a year and have to repeat the year. Now, that's not something that we have in the British system. It's not something that we apply here at all. The idea is, of course, is if a student is not at the same level as some of their classmates, then it's the teacher's job to bring them up, to differentiate the work and to make sure that they're able to approach the curriculum and lessons in a way that is accessible to them. So, and that's quite a big difference. The other difference in terms of examinations and things is there are no external examinations in the Spanish system in school. So when you get to 16, all the assessments that they will do are school-based. If they stay on to 18, the assessments they'll do at 18 are school-based. It's only if they go to university that they then will do an external, well, it's a university entrance exam called Selectividad, and that's what they would do in order to access university. Whereas, of course, the British system, well, as up until the last couple of years, because COVID has made everything a little bit different, has been that we've had external exams at 16 and external exams at 18. Most British schools or international schools do international GCSEs, so IGCSEs and IA levels, which are exactly the same as the regular A levels and GCSEs. The difference is that they're written specifically for international students, but the content, the level is exactly the same. Because they're external examinations, when students leave us after A level, they don't actually need to do Selectividad to go to a Spanish university because they've done these external examinations already. They may have to top up with doing some Spanish subjects in order to get more points to achieve the course that they want to get onto. Certain courses you need to have a higher number of points, but they don't actually have to do those external examinations. That said, most of our students don't go to Spanish universities; they go to international universities.
Interesting. Okay, I'm going to come on to universities in a second. I wanted to ask Sian about extracurricular activities, which is another important part of your application process when you reach that age. I think your boys are both, they're not at their age yet, right? They're kind of teens?
They're 10 and 12.
Oh, okay, yes, so young teens.
Yeah.
Extracurricular activities is a big part of primary school and secondary school from my memory, but do you find the opportunities the same as what you would expect in the UK?
There was such a hive of activity between mums and dads about what you're going to put your kids into, and all the schools, well, there's 7 or 8 schools in my town alone. All of them are advertising all these extra activities, and you don't have to stick to the ones with your school either. And then there's academies, there's all sorts of groups and teams that are just desperate to get people in, and it is so cheap. And you can be doing rollerblading, go-karting, maths, science, Lego, football. The list it's absolutely huge. Mine, they did the usual kind of ones like judo, football. A lot of parents send their children to like homework class so that they don't have to do the homework at home. They would go for a couple of hours to, again, sometimes private, sometimes an academy, and again, very, very cheap. Mine, because they've got long days with a 2-hour lunch break, I don't make them do any extra activities when they get home because it's quite late. But they do tend to do things in that 2-hour lunch break where there's extra activities as well. So my little one, he loves rollerblading, and they're doing rollerblading classes. The other one loves basketball. He's doing basketball.
So good. And so many options. I actually really love that. It doesn't have to be after school. It could be in the middle of the day, and when actually your energy levels are quite different, and that probably works really well for so many.
Yeah, and that used to regularly be my answer when some mums would say, oh, how can you send them off on the bus at 8 o'clock and they don't get back till nearly 6? But, I know that their children, they would come home at 2, they'd have their lunch, and they'd be off to extra activities for maybe 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
So it's actually the same, if not they're out more.
Yeah, totally. One thing that did just pop into my head when you were talking about that there are 7 or 8 schools in like close proximity to you. Is catchment area a thing that people need to consider when they move to Spain and they're considering where? Is it
because for state school, yes, and nursery.
Okay, interesting.
So again, a point system. Friends of my children, they're at now this point where they're looking to go to senior school, and they know which senior school they want, one of 3 in the area. And they will be awarded points on, are their siblings already in that school? Do your parents have any incapacity of any type? Is there low income? And then, the location of you to that house. Right.
So that's what you would recognise in the UK. That makes sense. I just wanted to double check. Andrew, on to universities then, because it's an interesting topic. Is UCAS, is there a Spanish equivalent to UCAS? How does that application process work? When you reach the point that you'd got to before, you were saying, maybe you're going to apply, maybe you don't need to apply with the, I can't remember what you said it was called. What was it called?
The Selectividad.
Selectividad. At that point, is it through something like UCAS?
No. So the system is a little bit more complicated. I mean, like I say, most Spanish students in Spanish schools end up going to Spanish universities. And actually, although this is changing a little bit, traditionally, what would happen or what would be expected is you actually would not, unlike in the UK where the expectation is you go away from home to go to university, most Spanish students will go to their local university. I mean, it like I said, that's changing a little bit, but most of our students who will go to a Spanish university will go to Malaga University because it's the closest university to here. It's unusual for a Spanish student to decide to go to Madrid or to Barcelona or somewhere else to go to university.
That's so interesting. Do you think that's just cultural? Do you think that's
I think it is cultural. I think generally speaking, young people tend to stay at home longer here in Spain than they do in the UK. I can't remember. It used to be something like, it'd be late 20s before the average young person would move out of home. It's very, very different to the UK.
Yeah.
So when you apply to the university of your choice. That's how it works. You don't have a central system like UCAS. As I said, most of our students don't go to Spanish University. We have some. We normally every year we'll have 2 or 3, but the majority of our students traditionally used to go to the UK and they used to apply through UCAS. Unfortunately, Brexit has kind of put a spanner in the works there a little bit, because it wasn't always British students who were going to the UK. It was Spanish students, it was Chinese students, it was Russian students. So it's what we found over the last couple of years is a lot of students are looking at places like the Netherlands, Germany, Scandinavia, because they're all part of the EU, and the way funding works and fees work. If you are going from one EU country to another EU country, you pay exactly the same as what a student who lives in that country would pay. Yeah. So in the Netherlands, it's €2,000 a year, more or less, to go to university. So a Spaniard going to the Netherlands to study will pay 2,000 as well. And the advantage is that, and it's something like 90% of university courses in the Netherlands you can do in English.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting. And it's similar in Scandinavia, right? Am I right in thinking they do a lot of free higher education stuff?
Some, and there are some in Germany as well. But there's usually some fee that has to be paid. That the options for free university education are not as many as there used to be. But it is a lot. I mean, now students who are going to the UK, I mean, they're paying. Well, it used to. Well. A British student pays $9,250 a year. Yeah. And if you're an EU student now, you're paying more than that. So it's a big ask.
Yeah. I mean, we're in danger of getting too political. I will bite my tongue on anything that I had in response to that. But it's just really interesting, and it's really worth keeping in mind. Is it something that you, as an institution, do you have careers advice? Are you helping students through this? Are you helping students' parents through this as well, these decisions?
Yeah. We, I mean, actually, it's interesting. We have a careers advisor in school who actually starts working with students from year 9. We we have a fantastic platform that we use, online platform, where the students start to build their profile from year 9, and it takes them through kind of step by step. It also helps them with making their option choices at year 9, and then making their option choices in year 11 to go into year 12. And our careers advisor works with them in terms of, actually does an awful lot of work in terms of helping them with their university applications, helping them write their personal statements, and also organising events to help them make good choices. So we have a careers week every year where we have somewhere in the region of 30 guest speakers come in and talk about their professions and how they got into their jobs and one thing or another. So and that is always works really well. And it's really important, I think, that particularly because a lot of our parents are not British, their understanding of, for example, British universities or universities outside of Spain is very limited. So we have to kind of guide them through that process just as much as their children. So
yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to touch on Erasmus, which I don't know tons about it. I kind of know what I learned at university and at school, and you hear about it. If you are an expat in Spain, can you take advantage of Erasmus in the same way?
My understanding is if you're a resident or a citizen, then yes, you could, because obviously your permanent place of residence is an EU country, so you would still be able to access that. Erasmus operates at lots of different levels. A lot of people know it as the kind of the university kind of level, but actually schools are involved in Erasmus projects too. And there's lots of things like e-twinning and things like this, where schools from different parts of Europe work together on joint projects. So as long as you're a resident or a citizen and your school, your institution is kind of facilitating that, then there's no issue with applying for Erasmus. So.
And I remember being 12, 13 and going to my town's twin in France and it being a big deal, and the French exchange was massive. Sian, is this recognisable? I know you've got a 10-year-old, 12-year-old. Is this the type of thing that you're thinking about? Is it experiences you want them to have? Is it important?
Absolutely, yeah. And this is the first time I've seen this kind of opportunity arrive since they've gone to the private school. They have an Erasmus programme. Funnily enough, only this morning I received an email from the school saying, would I be happy to take part in that and take in a child? And then, we would do the other side of that probably next year.
Oh, so fun. It's so good. It's like iconic. I remember it being a big part of your childhood.
It's so cool. And that's what I really want out of the private education system. That's why I move them. I want them to have all of these opportunities. I want them to see that, if they had a really normal job that had a low salary, I wouldn't mind, but I want them to have seen the opportunities and then they do what they want to do. I do feel at the moment in the state system, those opportunities are not displayed in front of the children. I don't think they know what's available out there. And the same as travel, Andrew was saying that a lot of Spanish children would further educate near to their family home. And I'm finding that more and more that my children's Spanish friends tend to not really leave the town and visit even neighbouring towns, let alone a different province, and definitely not another country. Whereas in the private school, they're having wonderful holidays and tours. And I think all the parents, and it isn't just a money thing for sure, because I know there's a lot of parents that scrimp and save and go without lots of things just to get together that money to pay for the education. But they're doing things, they're seeing more, and they want their children to have all of these experiences to have informed choices later in life.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I was going to ask, you've mentioned quite a few times your children's Spanish friends. Does it feel like there's a divide? As you get older, there are all of these different choices, and actually the systems are quite different. The time of your day is quite different. Where you end up going to university, how far away is quite different. How big is that divide? It doesn't seem like it with your kids. They have friends who are Spanish or English, loads of different types of people.
I think the divide is more with the parents, because the children are so adaptable and shiftable. They get on with whatever they get on with. But for me, I have to adapt on things like how late the children might go to bed. because I'm so not used to a child going to bed at 10, 11 o'clock from a young age. Whereas when I remember at the school gates when they were little and I told them that my children were going to bed at 7, I think they thought I was an absolute horror. But I am only doing that because that's what my mum did, and that's what my friends in the UK were doing. So life, there's a lot of adapting to do, but I think it lies more with the parents to let go of what you thought or what your beliefs were, what you thought was the right thing. Because actually, as a parent, you start realising there isn't a right and wrong many times, is there?
No. And I think that's fantastic to learn that. And I just love this idea that it's as much a journey for the parents as it is for the kids. And you really muddle your way through and find what suits you. So we're nearing the end. And I wanted to ask, Sian, I think I know the answer, but the experience of moving to Spain and the experience of having children in Spain, has it been a positive?
Oh, my goodness, yeah. Totally positive. I suppose it's not all rosy. There's some things I'd look back on and I think, I wish that was a bit more like what I understand in the UK. But on the whole, I wouldn't change a thing. And when we say those things, they're very small things like giving birth in Spain isn't as easy. I know this is about education, but when I say it's the first one that comes to mind. You don't have the big support afterwards of healthcare workers coming around checking you and the baby and all of that. But I think that goes with education a little bit as well. I think there's a much better parent-teacher relationship in UK schools. That's what I understand from my UK friends anyway. Whereas here it seems not so much in the private school, but in the state school, the mums send their kids off to school and what they do. And when they come home, there's nothing discussed. There doesn't seem to be
interesting
that thing.
And Andrew, would you agree with that? What do you think of the relationships between kind of parent-teacher? I suppose it's one thing we've not touched on, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think we approach things very much as we would if we were a school in the UK. I mean, my experience, I've been here at Sunnyview for 11 years. Before that, I was the deputy head of a school in South East London. And, we try and organise things very much like we would in the UK. So we maintain dialogue with parents all the time. If it's not through emails or newsletters or curriculum overviews or Facebook, now we use an awful lot to kind of share images. I mean, we actually, a couple of years ago, we now have a kind of a communications person who is constantly putting photos of things we're doing in school on Facebook. So we try very hard to keep that contact going with parents, because I think it is important, as Sian says, that parents should be having a dialogue with their children about learning. I mean, and I think sometimes you can find that parents, the questions that they ask their children when they come home from school don't really facilitate the child talking about learning. And it's important that we try and give them something to talk about. I saw this picture on Facebook of you doing this or whatever. It's, because there's every day we try and have lots of little wow moments in the school day to inspire and to kind of, stimulate children's imagination and thirst for learning. So, but yeah, I mean, and our parents are fantastic. I mean, we actually, because of COVID and what's happened over the last sort of 12 to 15 months, we changed a lot of things. Obviously, we were doing online learning, and that actually has changed a lot of the way we communicate both with students and with parents now, because parents now communicate a lot more directly with the teacher, whereas they used to always go through the school office, or they can actually email teachers directly. We use Microsoft Teams, so the students can communicate directly with the teachers, which is great as long as they're not doing it at 11 o'clock at night. Or even worse, 2 a.m. So we've tried very hard to facilitate that kind of openness, and I think it's important. I think parents always appreciate anything you can do to improve communication. I mean, everybody appreciates that, I guess.
But no, totally. And I think it's probably really reassuring to hear. So my final question to both of you really is if there is someone listening to this who is considering moving, but they're not sure how their children are going to fare or, how stressful that whole situation is going to be, do you have advice for them? Is there anything that we've not touched on so far that springs to mind? Sian, do you want to go first?
Yeah. I would say do things sooner rather than later, thinking of the child's age, because the younger you can bring a child over and immerse them into a new language, new culture, new everything, new temperatures even, there's so many things that are going to change for them. And the sooner they do that, I think it's great. It's a great wiring in their brain to have. I do know of people who have made a move from different countries with children at, say, 15 years old. They don't speak any Spanish. They've dropped them into a Spanish state school. And I think that's a bit harsh, if I'm really honest, because the girl and boy that I saw like this, they struggled a little bit with the language and their confidence dropped. And at 15, the last thing you need is a drop in confidence, and learning in a whole new language, not having any friends. So I think the sooner you can make this decision, the better. And if you do need to make that decision when your children are 14, 15, then think about an easier option. So an international school where they don't have to immerse and learn everything.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. Andrew, anything to add?
Well, I would absolutely 100% agree with what Sian's just said, because I think, I see the same thing as well. I think if you want to kind of, develop those language skills, the earlier you can come, the better, definitely. And I've had many experiences very similar to the ones that you've just described with, older students coming over here and really struggling with adapting because, the reality is it is much easier to kind of assimilate a second language when you're kind of 6, 7 than it is when you're 14, 15. And the only other thing I'd say is if you are coming and you're looking at international schools as your preferred option, and I say this to everybody who comes and visits our school, go and see as many as possible, ask as many questions as you can. And because choosing a school is a really, really personal decision. And sometimes you'll walk through the gates of the school and you'll think, absolutely not. This is not the kind of environment I want my child to be experiencing on a daily basis. And other times you'll come through and you'll think, no, this is exactly the kind of, it's exactly where I want my child to be. So see as many schools as possible, talk to as many head teachers as possible. And I think, again, as Sian said, start this process as early as possible.
Yeah, fantastic.
I'd love to add to that as well, Andrew. So we visited a number of schools, private schools. And when we found one that we really liked and it came very well recommended, I think we visited on 4 occasions. And I even took my parents with me. And then I took my husband's parents just to have, this real wide vision of what's everyone thinking. And we went at different times of the day. I wanted to meet different people. I wanted to see classrooms. So yeah, fully do your research, and what's right for me won't be right for somebody else. So
absolutely.
I love that. I think that's great. That's fantastic advice. And thank you so much. This episode has been just jam-packed with really useful insights. I know you're both really busy people, so I really appreciate. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks, Anthony.